so much for registering for and for attending this science webinar today on how to move your science courses online. Today we have a few different speakers. We've got Matthias Bergman, we also have Ginger Fisher and Kelly Brown. So yeah, again, welcome to our speakers, Matthias, Ginger and Kelly. Today for this session, we will be going through a couple of different situations where we have used Connect to move your science courses online, how that has played out at different institutions, what that has looked like, some tips and tricks to offer you guys as well from Matthias and Ginger. And then we will be moving over to Kelly, who will be running you through a little bit more about what that will look like to get Connect into your classroom, implementation, any sort of, again, what tips and tricks, but more of a technical side about getting Connect into the classroom for science. We do want this to be a very interactive session today, so any questions that you guys will have, please make sure that you are putting that in the chat box throughout. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session. Any questions that we do not get a chance to answer on this session, we will follow that up in an email afterwards on a document as well. So please continue to write those questions, and if we don't get a chance to get those answered, that will come through later. So just jumping through to the moderators for today's session. There is myself. We also have Afsana on the call to run us through, and also Parveen will be on board to help us with those questions. So from this point now, I will give the session over to Afsana, who will run you through some general housekeeping for this session.
Thank you, Mel. Can I just do a quick sound check before I begin? If you could just raise your hand if you can hear me. Perfect. Okay. So just before we begin, like Mel mentioned, I will go through a bit of housekeeping just so we know and you guys are aware of everything that's going on during the session. Just a heads up in terms of connectivity. I think most of you have dialed in using your computers and your headphones, but if you do have any connectivity issues during the call, do use your phones, which you can do by disconnecting from the audio and then connecting by either calling in or having WebEx call you in. And just if you do have any other people in the house using other kind of high bandwidth platforms like YouTube or Netflix, that could also impact connectivity. And if you do miss anything because of your network, we are recording the session and we'll be circulating that after as well. And of course, there'll be a Q&A opportunity at the end, as Mel mentioned earlier. And in terms of asking questions and adding your comments in or sharing your thoughts, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom to ask any questions for speakers. And what we will do is we will collate these questions into a document, and then we'll be answering them or getting them answered at the end of the session. And in terms of any comments or feedback for the speakers, you can just use the chat box, which is also just on the right-hand side above the Q&A. If you do have any technical issues during the call, please do use the chat box as well, and I'll be on hand to respond to any queries. And I think that's all from me, so I'll pass back on to Mel.
Perfect, thank you, Afsana. So we will be getting started on this session, and also just to let you guys know that all of these slides will be sent to you as well after this session. So any of these links in this presentation, any information at all, you will also be receiving that. So as well as a recording for this session, which you are more than welcome to send around to your colleagues that could not make it to this session. So to get started, we are starting with Matthias, who will be running us through some gamification of the resources that we have online, how that played out in his course, and how that gave him some very successful results. So over to you, Matthias. Just make sure you unmute yourself. There we go. Matthias, I think you're still on mute. Just make sure that you unmute.
Okay, yes. Okay, Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Matthijs Bergman. I'm happy to share my experience with McGraw Hill Connect and Learn Smart, and I want to tell you something about how I did use these systems to gamify my course, and also how these systems helped me with going online during COVID pandemic. So first of all, every teacher I know is really occupied and has a huge workload. So why on earth would you gamify a good course? We had several reasons. First reason is that in our program in 10 years increased from 35 students to over 300 sometimes. But we had the same amount of staff and only were supplemented with 3 junior lecturers. So a lot of students, little teachers. We also were moved with our course from a period from 4 weeks full-time teaching towards a period in which we had 8 weeks teaching part-time. And in parallel, there was a course in methodology, and usually methodology is can be really a struggle for the students that we teach. And furthermore, in this time period, there are in the Netherlands selections going on for students that want to enter med school. So the students are really busy. And what we saw that during, because of these changes, the number of students that dropped out of this course after on halfway of this course was about 10 to 15%. And also in the end, the success rate dropped from a little over 80 to around 60%. So that was quite a concern of us. So what I did not invent gamification myself, but I heard it once and I thought this would be a good opportunity to try it. So we looked for a book, another book than we used, and I did this with my students. And we came on a book of Prescott's Microbiology. And it was not really the book that clearly stood out, but the digital tests and exercises that were available through Connect. The book is good, by the way, but especially these digital platforms and also the Learn Smart adaptive learning tool was really grabbing my attention. So what I did furthermore was I made the course material more concise, and the real deepening and exercises I disconnected from the basic theory. And that's of course the opposite that you normally do. You try to blend as much as possible, but I took it all apart for reasons I'll tell you later. And what I also did was incorporate extra challenges for excellent students. And I applied some concepts known as gamification. And these were the concepts of freedom of choice, competition, challenge, and reward. So how my course looks like now is we have like 8 weeks of teaching. And in these 8 weeks, we have almost 7 weeks of lectures, and we have some practicals, we have a challenge assignment, and in the end, we have an exam, but also halfway we have also an exam, so 2 partial exams. And in this course, students are supported by Learn Smart exercises, and these are exercises that are pre-built, but you can adapt along as you like. You can focus on the topics that you want your students to learn. And also, I used Connect tests to make students making tests at home. And all these tests had a deadline, and this deadline was always just before the partial exam about the block of learning material. So these Learn Smart exercises and these Connect testings were the basis of this course. And so students were supported by LearnSmart and were tested by Connect. So when you look at my course now, it consists of 3 levels, and the levels, level 1 and level 2, are divided in basics and testing, and practical stuff like, for instance, a computer practicum, molecular cloning, or writing a policy advice for outbreak management. But the 3rd level, these are the in-depth assignments a student can only reach when he or she qualifies for this level. So, in qualification is as follows. The lecture of the course was gamified, so we don't reward with grades anymore, but students can score credits, and the ideal student can obtain 10,000 credits. So it equals a 10 on the scale of 1 to 10. So that's the maximum grade. So in the first part of the course, students can make these Connect tests. They can do the partial exam, and the maximum amount of credits they can obtain is 3,500. And if they obtain more than 2,750 of these 3,500, they qualify for a challenge. And this challenge they can do for a maximum of 1,000 points. Further scoring of my course is in the second block. There's also 3,500 points to earn. So this makes testing 7,000 points, a challenge assignment for 1,000 points, and together this is 8,000 points, and this is supplemented by the credits that are awarded for the practical assignments. So in the end, the ideal student aims for 10,000 points. Okay. So, but what about the challenge assignment? These are really good, I think. Students can choose from a number of assignments. We have a couple of, I think, 6 or 8 pre-cooked. And these assignments are application of learning objectives. So when students learn during molecular cloning how to identify a vaccine candidate, they can do so by identifying and making in silico a vaccine against pathogen of their own choice, and explain how they will develop the vaccine and bring it to market. They can also do an assignment in science communication, but there are also fun assignments. So students can go to their backyard and isolate or catch tardigrades. So these little animals, microorganisms. And these animals are really resistant against dehydration and also cosmic radiation. So they have to sort out how that works. But they can also go and visit their local brewery and bakery, study recipes for making bread and wine or beer. And then they have to explain the different metabolic pathways that the microorganisms use to produce CO2 or alcohol in these food components. But, and this is really fun, students can also write their own proposal. And this works like judging in gymnastics. They write their proposal. I judge the difficulty and the quality of the project, and then I award the credits they can earn. So, and it is really nice because I have some students. Last year a student developed a lesson for children of 10 to 12 years old to explain them how the immune system works and how it fights pathogens. So this is really, they often make me really proud. But what about the prizes to earn? This is also very important in gamification. So students really are triggered by going for the high scores because they can get a certificate looking nice on their CV. They can earn a voucher for a letter of recommendation on any other time point in their study career. For the top 20, or depending on how much money I have, top 30, I buy them tickets for Artis Microbial Museum. It's the only museum on microbes in the world. It's really nice. But also students that don't really get high scores in testing, but really good scores in practical exercises are not forgotten. So for them, I make homemade brownies. And these are not instant brownies, but I make brownies from a recipe from the winner of Heel Holland Bakt, which is a spin-off of the great, the British, I think the Great British Bake Off, as I recall correctly. So these are really nice prizes, but of course there will be one winner, and the winner takes it all in this case. So the student with the highest score, final score, can choose from a unique design product that I made myself. So students can choose for a T-shirt, female or a male model. If they don't like T-shirts, they can opt for a cap or a thong or an apron. But there's a reason why most people choose the shirts, because I assure them that I want to have a picture of them for the Hall of Fame. And this is always fun. We take the pictures in the Artis Microbial Museum, usually. So the students are really engaged, and I have a lot of contact with my students, which is also very fun. Okay, so in the end, gamification, it's a lot of work, but it really pays off. And students make a very good start with their course, because by the Connect courses, they are kind of forced to keep up with pace. And this results in that around 80% passes the partial exam. And the number is not really much bigger than before gamification, but the grade, the average grade with which they pass the exam is 1 point higher on a scale of 10. So this is really a big difference. And also a lot of them are really aiming for qualification for a challenge. So the final results are really satisfying. So we don't have virtually not any dropouts anymore. And this used to be between 10 and 50% of students that just gave up halfway the course because they wanted to focus on methodology, or they didn't pass exam 1 and they just gave up hope. Around 80% passes with a sufficient average for both partial exams, and this used to be around 60%. And not only a success rate is going up, but also they score a grade of half point higher. And about 15 to 25 of the students annually that qualify for a challenge, they really make a very good challenge, and often they surprise me. So, and with these challenges, they score between 800 and 1,000 points. So it's also 1 point on their final grade. But then this year, we all noticed that COVID kicked in. So I was looking forward to giving my course in gamification again, but this was not allowed. So no physical teaching. So we succeeded in getting our course online within 2 weeks, and mainly because the Connect and Learn Smart provided a very solid basis for not only for the course but also for the students. And what we did is we around these Connect and Learn Smart modules, we recorded all lectures as 20 to 30 minute knowledge clips. And we published these clips according to the schedule for the course. So the students had kind of a structural framework which helped them to divide their time between our course and the parallel course. And also the rest of the assignments were put online, and the teaching and the supervision of the practical exercises we gave by Zoom. And finally, the results. At first, they were really disappointing because 31% of the students passed the test. This time there were grades, no points to earn. But what surprised me, and afterwards I got a good explanation, is that at the second attempt, so at the reset test, 80% of the students passed the test. So in the end, the same amount of students as usually passed the test. And when I discussed this with them, they said a lot of this was because of this Connect Learning and Learning Smart material that were available online. So conclusion, gamification really works. As a teacher, you are really busy, but really in contact with your students. It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. But not all students like this concept of gamification. The excellent ones do, but the people that struggle with microbiology, they maybe don't like the concept of gamification, but they really like the SmartBook, the Connect, and the Learn Smart modules. So instead of challenge, these platforms offer them support, and that's also a good thing in teaching. But what personally I really like is the challenge assignments. And because of these Connect and Learn Smart modules, I was really happy that I had them. So I could put my course online within 2 weeks when COVID happened. So this was what I wanted to share with you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that, Matthias. Thank you for running us through gamification in your course, what that looked like, how you got those really great results as well. Everybody, we will be opening up at the end of the session, obviously, for some of those great questions coming through on gamification for Matthias. Also, I will be popping his contact details at the end of the presentation as well. So if you want to know more about gamification or how to use Connect in your microbiology course or in your science course, please make sure you do reach out to him for more information. So right now, we will be passing over to Kelly and Ginger. They're doing their session together. So I'll pass this over to you guys. Kelly, I think you've got the presentation when you're ready. Perfect.
All right. I'm Kelly Brown, and I'm the marketing manager for biology in the U.S. for McGraw Hill, and Ginger Fisher is one of our faculty consultants who utilizes the Connect digital tools, and she teaches at the University of Northern Colorado. So Ginger is going to start us off today talking a little bit about her biology course.
All right, so I would say good morning, everyone, but I realize it's probably only morning for me. So I wanted to just talk a little bit today about how to use some of these tools in a general biology course. And I think anyone who teaches biology understands, I sort of put here the purpose. This is what I put out for my students. You'll notice that there's both topics, parts of the cell and DNA, but also skills. What do scientists really do? And I think most of us who teach these biology courses struggle with this idea of having to teach content and also teach skills. So you want to move to the next slide, Kelly? The biggest challenge that I find, so I teach, just to give you an idea, the University of Northern Colorado. Our biology course has about 600 to 750 students in it, depending on the enrollment that year. And the students are then expected to move on. So we need them to have a really large working knowledge of just basic chemistry, cell biology, and math. And so we find that they have a high volume of new content that they have to learn. And that's very challenging for many of our students. And so when I took over the course many years ago, I realized that we needed some solutions that it would work well with a very large number of students. And some of my students were not as prepared for the college environment as I would have hoped. And so I'm going to talk today about some of those solutions. And so, go ahead, Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
So the first solution, that we're going to talk about is this idea of adaptive modules. And Matthias talked about this a little bit, where I wanted something that would help all of my students get to the same level before they walked into my classroom, or after COVID clicked on the classroom button. So I'm looking for something that would engage and assess students in the content, but also in a format that was tailored to them individually. Because I teach a large number of students, I needed it to automatically work with my course management system. I use Canvas, I'm not sure what you will use. And I needed it to be customizable because I like to have control, and I like to make sure that my students are learning what I need them to learn in order to move on to the next courses. The other thing that I really liked about the modules when I looked at the McGraw Hill things was that there was feedback that was provided in reports. And we'll talk a little bit about how valuable that is. And I use two types of modules. I use the prep modules and then the SmartBook. So I thought we'd start by talking about prep. Go ahead, Kelly, there we go. So prep itself is self-paced, so students work through at their own pace. And it's also adaptive, meaning that if the student understands the concept, they move on. And if they struggle with that concept, it keeps coming back to them in different ways. And so that gives them the ability to, for the strong students, just sort of move ahead, and the student who's struggling can get that information. Prep is best when used at the beginning of the course. Then there are a ton of learning resources in this so that students can get quality instruction on topics that they're confused before they ever get to my classroom, so that I can then move to a higher level of understanding for my students. So prep itself, the next slide shows you the topics that are in prep, just to give you a quick glance. For many of you who teach biology, you know that there's basically how we do science. Introductory students often struggle with chemistry and math. I find to be two of the big areas that my students struggle. And then the last piece on here, the fundamentals of student success, help students a good bit with time management and things that learning how to study, how to be a strong student. And so I thought I would show you, go ahead, Kelly, a little bit about what this looks like. So this is just a screenshot from prep. And you can see that for the students, I've given them an assignment, and now they can build their own study schedule. And so there are good tips in here about how long it might take. If you're going to do it only one day, this is the amount of time you would need to take. And I find that students really benefit from having someone give them an idea of how to set up their time. And I obviously don't have time to do this with my 700 students, so I rely on the software to do it for them. And then on the next slide, it shows you, go ahead, Kelly, they can choose a learning mission. So whether or not they want to just focus on answering 10 questions correctly, work for 20 minutes, do they want to complete the assignment? So there are some options, and I find that students like having this level of control so that they can decide how they want to attack or approach the problem. These are what the questions look like. I just popped one up here for you. This is obviously on atomic mass. And then if the student gets it incorrect, what you'll see on the next slide, this is an example. If you get it incorrect, on the right-hand side, you can see that then students are directed to suggested resources. There's a slide with information on this topic. There's a video that they can watch. They can go to a library of topics. And so this is helping the student be prepared for class, right? This is the whole idea of prep, or be prepared for the semester. Things that, in my case, my students should have learned in high school, but may either have not learned or have forgotten. And so this way, they can get that information and feel confident when they walk into the classroom. So go ahead, Kelly. And then at the end, it tells them how they did. It gives them an idea of whether or not they've completed things, but also how long they took, how many things they got right. So just a basic progress report, which I think is really important to help students build that confidence. So when to use prep? Ideally, you would assign this before the semester even started. I don't have access to my students. Their learning software doesn't turn on until the first day of class. And so if you can't access them beforehand and give them sort of course assignments, this is what I do. You can see sort of a chunk of my syllabus here. Early in the semester during those first weeks, I assigned sort of the prep, the math review, the basic chapters. I will say I have learned over time to take the word prep out and rename them because students like to think they're already prepared. And so they don't like that particular terminology, so I change it up a little bit. You could also use this as a flipped classroom assignment. I'm not sure how familiar you are with flipped classrooms, but that would be where students do the early work, and then during class they do worksheets and active learning activities. It's also a great remedial work for struggling students. So if I have students really struggling in chemistry, I send them back to these modules to make sure that they see the concepts. And then on the next slide, the other big thing that I use throughout my semester is the SmartBook. This is very similar in that it's adaptive. It works with my learning management system. The way I do this is I require all of my students, we call them the homework assignments. They must read and complete the SmartBook assignment before they come to class that day. The big reason for this, there's two. One, this frees up time in class. I don't have to go over that basic definition anymore. They've already learned that from the homework. So then we can do more active learning. We can do more in-depth concepts. The other reason I require it before class is that I get data on how well the students did. So I get information and reports. Then I know which concepts my students struggled with and which things I need to highlight in my class during that particular day. So Kelly, if you want to look at it, so what this looks like, when you assign a SmartBook assignment, you get to tell the software which learning outcomes are important to you, which ones you want to cover. When you do that, the textbook is then automatically highlighted, and it's focused on those learning outcomes. That way, students can pull it up, it will be highlighted for them, and they already know what you think is important, or in my case, what I think is important, and where to focus their learning. And on the next slide, Kelly, this is just what it looks like. Here's a question. They can click and learn about it in the text. I will say it doesn't take them directly to the answer, because that would be easy, but it takes them to the section in which that would be covered. And then again, on the next slide, you'll see I answered it wrong, and then I could click and learn in the text. It will keep, these concepts will keep coming back until the students have mastered them. Then what you can get, and Kelly kind of popped it up for me there, you'll get these two levels of reports. Students get reports, and you get reports on how the students are doing. And I think this is one of the key features for me in this particular piece of software. So you can see the student reports, right? They get the basics, you know, their progress, their accuracy, but they are actually told their most challenging learning concepts. And I tell my students to print this out or you know, make a note of this so that when they come to class, they already know where they're struggling. So when I cover those topics in class, they can make sure that they understand it now. And then the next slide will also show you some other reports. Their most challenging learning objectives, there are some tips to improve their learning, things that they could do to be a better student. The other piece on the bottom left is the cognition, their metacognition reports, which tells them sort of metacognition is basically how well do you know what you know and what you don't know, right? What is your understanding of your own knowledge? And you'll notice on those questions, they had to answer first whether or not they knew the concept. So this is matching that up. Did they think they know it, but they didn't? And it gives them an idea of their sense of confidence and whether that confidence is rooted in their own knowledge or if it's a false sense of confidence. You want to click ahead. So how do you get students to check the reports, right? Just because they're there doesn't mean students will look at them. These are things that I have done in the classroom. These are also things you could do online. I've had them just do a print screen and hand it in for extra credit. They easily submit that online. I've had them write a 1-minute reflection, which is just read a report and spend a minute telling me what you've learned from it. I've also had them use it to write what's called a muddiest point, what was most confusing about the assignment. So there's a bunch of ways that you can get students to actually check the reports. Once they start to check them, they see the value in them. As an instructor, you also get reports, and you get lots of reports. So you get individual and whole class reports, looking at completion, how much time, their metacognitive scores, how many concepts were challenging, and then for me, it's key, I get which concepts were challenging for the entire class. So now I can walk into a classroom of hundreds of students and know, okay, overall, most students struggled with this concept. I don't have time to rewrite my lectures, obviously, every day to focus on that. Instead, I just put a quick star on my slides so that I know that this is where I need to slow down and make sure that students are understanding. I use these for active learning assignments. So I do a lot of active learning in my classroom. And if I see a concept over and over where students are struggling, that's where I put my active learning assignments. I also use them, I use course response clickers where students can click in. And this is a great place to add some clicker questions and say, okay, you struggled with this on the homework. Now we've talked about it. How are we doing? And that really does a few things. It helps them understand the concept, but it also shows the students that you value their homework assignments and that they're not just busy work. So if you want to move to the next one. So then I also get an at-risk student report. This is incredibly important for me because early on I can identify students who are struggling. I can send them a message directly. During the first week, it's usually a message of, hey, did you know there's homework? Can you not afford your textbook? What's going on? And that gets me a quick response. And we can often address problems before they really become a problem throughout the semester. Obviously, in this slide, I grayed out the students' names, but they would be listed. You can just easily message them very quickly. And then on the next slide. So these are just some of my data that I'm playing with. Please don't use them. They're not published yet. But what you get is a metacognition report. And so this is showing you students' final course grade, and then the proportion of times that they were correct and aware. So in other words, they said, yes, I know the answer, and they actually did. So this would not be surprising data if this was during, you know, the end of the semester. This is actually week 2 of a 16-week semester. So early on, I can get an idea of which students are struggling simply by looking at those metacognition reports. The next slide is even more intriguing because this shows you how many were incorrect but unaware. So basically, they thought they knew it, but they didn't. And that is a big problem for my students. They will come and say, you know, I knew the concepts, but I took the exam and it was a trick question, or, you know, I thought I knew what I was doing. And so the big thing for me when a student comes in individually to my office, I can pull up their metacognition report as well as this graph and talk to them about false confidence and how to know what they know and what they don't know. That conversation is very different if I have a student who's often correct but unaware, right? They lack confidence. So I use these metacognition reports a lot in individual meetings with students. So on the next slide, Kelly. Thinking. There we go. Couple of things just to think about. The student reports, I use them to make the students more aware of their own learning, and it allows them to see their progress and make changes. The instructor reports, I use them 2 different ways. I use them when working with individual students because it helps me target those at-risk students and identify those. And it also helps me in advising and helping students figure out how to be more successful. And then I use them for the entire class. If I can focus on areas where students struggle, then we can spend less time on other things. And it's really helped me over the course of a couple of years to create my active learning activities that are tailored to the concepts where students actually struggle, not the concepts that I thought they struggled on. And it also, I can hold students accountable for their own learning. I can give them these assignments. They're relatively lower order blooms. In other words, they're sort of basic understanding. And then I can start my classroom at a higher level. And that allows me to get to the more in-depth things that I'm much more interested in teaching than sort of the very, very basics. And so what we find, right, students need to learn the skills, right? So those are the concepts. Now we get to how do we get students to learn skills, right? To be a scientist, you need to interpret your data, right? The list is here. You need to be able to solve problems, and getting students the opportunity to actually practice these skills is a big problem in a huge lecture hall. And so we have some solutions, and Kelly's going to talk about these and show you kind of what they look like.
Thank you, Ginger. The first solution that I'm going to show is called our data and graphing interactives. And as Ginger mentioned, you could use these as an active learning assignment. You could use it in lecture. You could also use some of these in lab. So we have instructors that use them in both places. I'm going to show you the genetic drift graph first, and then I'll go in and show you one on infections and herd immunity, but kind of how these work for the students. I'm in Connect, my Connect site here, and I'm just previewing this as a student. But you'll see that as the graph pulls up, the students get a little bit of maybe 2 paragraphs of kind of introduction Genetic drift is a very complex biological process, and it's the phenomenon where allele ratios can change, and how alleles can be dropped from a population. So something that's kind of difficult to explain in a static format, but having an active format, in this case a simulation, you can kind of have the students work through the various variables in the simulator and then work through some scenarios utilizing the data and graphs. So in this case, I'm going to change my allele percentage of big A to little a up to 60 big A and 40 little a. I'm going to move my population size down to 800, and I'm going to move my number of generations up to 3,000, and I'm going to run the simulator. So students can manipulate all of these variables. They can run the simulation multiple times, and you're seeing that I'm getting some variation in my simulation, but I haven't had one yet that has hit either the top edge of the graph or the bottom edge of the graph. And in genetic drift, hitting the top edge of the graph or the bottom edge of the graph would represent an allele being dropped out of that gene pool or some sort of genetic deformation. So I'm going to clear the graph and reset it. I'm going to change my big A to little a to percentage to 50-50. I'm going to change my population size down to 50. I know many of you are scientists, and you know that genetic drift has a lot to do with population size. And as I run the simulation now, you'll see more variation, but again, I have not hit the top edge or the bottom edge of the graph. I can run this multiple times, and you'll see on my third attempt, I hit the top edge of the graph, which represents an allele being dropped from this gene pool. Again, as a student, I can run this multiple times. But the idea behind having a simulator or a graph like this is we want the students to be able to play with the variables, to adjust those, to run through different scenarios, to make scientific assumptions, develop a hypothesis, and then to test that and collect the data accordingly. So all of our graphs have questions wrapped around them that are assignable and auto-gradable within Connect. I'm going to briefly scroll through some of these questions down below, and you'll see that, for example, question number 3 talks about an albino deer species that's only seen in small a to small a homozygotes. Which population has the highest likelihood of becoming entirely albino within 500 years? So students literally would run all 4 of those scenarios through the simulator and then find out the correct answer and enter that in. Again, auto-gradable and auto-assignable within Connect. You'll see that question 5 here deals with one of the data sets from the United States, but it's the wolf and moose populations on Isle Royale, an island that's isolated in the middle of the Great Lakes. And the wolf populations dropped down to 12 animals after the accidental introduction of the paravirus. And years later, they found that genetic drift had caused fixation in the deleterious alleles that impaired the bone development in the wolves. So again, the idea behind these graphs, you can use them as an active learning activity in class, or you could have them do this as part of a lab assignment. And then assign the questions that are wrapped around the individual graph. I'm going to show you one additional one. We have 44 of these data and graphing interactives live now in Connect, but we are going to continually add more in the future. This one we did actually we created this before COVID hit, but it's very, very informative in terms of infection rates and herd immunity. So instructors and students alike have really used this graph quite a bit with the pandemic that we've all been experiencing. You'll see that as a student, I can take in this graph and I can say, I want to see what the measles rate looks like with an 80% vaccination. I can initiate this. You'll see that I grab the time over here on the the bottom left, and with 80% vaccination rate, I have a fairly flat curve. I can reset that and see what it looks like without vaccination rate, and you'll probably see quite a large growth here without vaccinations. What's nice is that you can also do a kind of a compare and contrast. And so in the top panel, I'm going to choose a ring vaccination for Ebola. In the bottom panel, I'm going to do Spanish flu, seasonal flu with like a 40% vaccination rate. And then I can kind of initiate this. I can grab my, my time, and you can see the growth on the bottom graph with only 40% vaccination, and you can see the ring vaccination up at the top. This graph allows me to switch from dot panel to kind of line view or line graph based upon the data, and the students can kind of work through the different settings, and they can then answer the questions. So the questions, here's one on herd immunity, comparing measles with other diseases, vaccination rates, the impact of higher vaccination rates on herd immunity, the impact of the location of patient 0, and the impact on immunocompromised people, and ring vaccinations in Ebola. All of our graphs have between 5 and 10 questions wrapped around them. The first graph I showed you had 5 questions wrapped around it. This one has 7. You can pick and choose. If you didn't want to assign all 7, you can assign just the questions that you would like your students to work through. So Ginger again talked a little bit about utilizing some active learning in her classroom, and these data and graphs we feel are an excellent tool to do an active learning exercise, whether it's in a face-to-face or traditional class or online. You can have your students, work through and understand the scientific skill set necessary to interpret and collect graphing information and data. So I'm going to toggle back over to our PowerPoint presentation and kind of wrap this up with a few pieces. Ginger, actually, you were going to kind of mention some of the active learning resources in the Connect instructor resources.
Right. So I love active learning, but I don't have time to make it all, and I'm not that creative. So I love that the textbook comes with, under instructive resources, there's a whole section on active learning, which includes clicker questions that are already written for you, as you can see. And those clicker questions already tell you what level of balloons they are. If you're not familiar with balloons, basically how difficult they are and what skills they require students to do. There are minute papers. Minute papers are assignments that students could complete in a minute that are a little more in-depth. There are concept maps. So there's a lot of different tools that you could use either in your classroom or online. And one of the things, I don't have time to go over all these today, but under instructor resources, you can actually click on videos, and McGraw Hill has created some videos that help show you how to use those in your classroom, so that if you're not familiar with how you would do these, those are actually there for you. But I use these all the time. Many times I use them, I read one of these, and then I use it as a starting point. I may modify it so it's more specific for my course, but it's great to have these things here so that I don't have to come up with them all myself.
Great. Thank you, Ginger. In terms of implementation, we've talked about several digital tools, and we know that where the rubber meets the road is really all about implementation and how you use this in your course. So at McGraw Hill, we created a biology digital implementation guide. It includes some best practices. It includes how to design your course around using these digital tools. And then it matches kind of the course needs that you have to the appropriate digital solution, whether it be the data and graphing interactives or active learning exercises, or some of the homework exercises with both Learn Smart and the prep modules. So this tool, the Biology Implementation Guide, we are going to provide to everybody as a follow-up to this webinar. So you'll complete a brief survey after the end of the webinar, and you can download a copy of this digital implementation guide about these best practices. It includes kind of a sample syllabus, as well as Ginger mentioned, how-to videos for each digital solution. So if you want to incorporate some of the data and graphing interactives or active learning or any of these tools, but you don't know quite how to take that first step, watch the videos because we've created those for you that you can utilize. So again, everybody will receive a copy electronically of the biology implementation guide as we wrap up the webinar today. Ginger, I want to talk briefly about teaching online and Proctorio tool for doing online proctoring. So Ginger uses this in her class at Northern Colorado, but McGraw Hill has a partnership now with Proctorio. So maybe you can kind of share your experience utilizing this tool.
Right. So I run an entirely online master's program that's separate from sort of this course, and we have used Proctorio there for, we've gone through 3 different systems and settled with Proctorio as our system to monitor students while they take exams. In the spring, this was not available through McGraw Hill, so students took exams on sort of the honor system, and many students were honorable and quite a few were not. So I was very excited to see this. My plan now is all of my exams for my biology course will be written through the Connect software so that students can then be proctored using Proctorio. The short version is it videotapes the students. It kind of gives you, it locks down their browser. You get reports on how the students are doing. The basic Proctorio will come as part of the course, as part of Connect. And then you can opt for a plus version, and I'm sure Kelly can give you more details. But after going through 3 separate proctoring systems, this is by far our favorite.
Yeah. Starting, this summer, McGraw Hill and Proctorio is available within Connect so that you can utilize, the basic video proctoring in a lockdown browser to help administer quizzes, exams, and the Plus version gives you some additional 24/7 chat and phone support, as well as some additional identity verification options. So please talk to your local McGraw Hill representative about the new partnership with Proctorio for delivering quizzes, exams, etc. In an online fashion. And in kind of wrapping up, I do want to make a very quick plug for our virtual labs solution. In the sciences, we know that the labs course is very important, and it's, in the age of teaching online, having lab offerings is important. And we conducted an entire webinar, an hour-long webinar just on virtual labs. It was about 2.5 weeks ago. If you attended that, great. We appreciate it. And so we don't have time in this webinar to go through the labs in detail, but we are going to send out the recorded link for the labs webinar as part of the follow-up from today's webinar. So if you didn't have a chance to attend our labs webinar previously, you can watch it on demand. But I will mention briefly that McGraw Hill has, in the life sciences, both for microbiology, anatomy and physiology, as well as all of the biology, developed this series of what we call our Connect virtual labs. And as part of the Connect package with those titles, you get access to the virtual labs. We had planned on releasing these in June of this year, and when COVID hit in March, we kind of bumped up the date, and those labs that we had ready at that time, we made those live and gave instructors access to the labs so that they could finish off their semesters with utilizing the virtual labs. It's been a tremendous success for us because students have been being able to finish the semester in an online environment utilizing the virtual labs. So again, if you have questions on the virtual labs, you're going to get a link for a complete hour-long webinar just on virtual labs, and we'll kind of address those then. So lastly, I think we have some time for some questions, and Mel, I think we only have a few minutes, but are there any questions that kind of came through on the chat line and Q&A line?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kelly and Ginger, for that part of the presentation. That was really, really helpful just to see the innovation that was brought into the classroom as well. I'm just going to grab the presentation back, Kelly, if that's okay. Perfect. Okay, cool. So the Q&A part of this session, again, thank you, Kelly, for introducing the virtual lab. So that was a session that we did run to show you how to move your physical wet lab from your classroom to an online virtual lab, which will come out again after this session. We have had quite a few questions coming through. One of them was about virtual labs, so luckily you will be finding out more information about that. However, Ginger, this one is specifically for you. However, Matthias, you can definitely apply your situation to this as well. So Ginger, you did specify about providing the students with some work before they actually get into the classroom. We have a question here about what would you want your students to read ahead or work ahead? When do you make this material available? Would that be 1 week before the session, 1 day? And also just to expand on that, because teachers generally want to know this as well, would you make the whole semester available at the beginning and then allocate as you go along, or what would that sort of look like?
Right, so if I could, I cannot. I would assign the basic math skills, because it has graphing, and the student success the week before our classes begin. And then I incorporate the chemistry and the other topics in prep in that first week. Unfortunately, I don't have access to my students, so I kind of cram it all in at the beginning. And then whether or not, so I open all of my assignments at the beginning of the semester, regardless of whether I'm online or on campus. So all of them, that helps for students. I have quite a few students who work part-time, and so that allows them to fill in and get their assignments done around their own life and their own schedules. And that made a big difference during COVID when we went online. Students could then take a day if they had to. It's not good pedagogy. It's not the way I want it to be, but that recognizes the reality of students' lives. So I open up everything from day one, as long as I have it ready.
Matthias, did you have anything to add there as well? Do you tend to do the same sort of approach there? Just make sure you unmute. You're on mute again.
Sorry. No, yeah, I do the same as Ginger. I only have them for 8 weeks. So in the beginning, I give them some assignments to look what level they are. But I made all the home tests available of the first block, because with this gamification, of course, I have 2 blocks, but all of them are available in the first half home test, so students can make them whenever they want, and yeah. So that's it gives them a sort of control, and they like it.
Absolutely agree. So we have a question here about the results and the performances. We have a attendee that wants to know, can we extract or export the classroom performances into Excel? Would that be something that you guys traditionally do when you're looking at the results and the outcomes, or do you keep it all within Connect? How do you sort of approach those results?
I can you answer this question? All the home test assignments are collected by Connect, and I can download it in Excel. And of course, I have these ranking lists on my computer to sort of real-time keep track of how students are doing. So what I do is, after the deadline has been reached, I just download the Excel from Connect and read them in my own Excel file. But yeah, all the reports that Ginger showed, that which students are at risk and which are doing very well, I just use on the background to keep track on how all my students together are doing. Yeah, so I use them, but I don't analyze them like Ginger does.
So they are, yeah, so the reports, I think most of them you can download to Excel. I don't do that very often with the reports. However, excuse me, any of the graded assignments go directly to my learning management system, because that way students can see them, and that is downloadable. So I do everything within the LMS rather than in Connect.
Great. We do have quite a few other questions, and I know that this session is completed. However, if anybody wants to stay on for this webinar, please continue. We will go through maybe a couple more questions, and then we will follow this up anyway. So just for anyone else that wants to stay, we have some more questions around LMS. So we have a question from a attendee. Does anyone integrate Moodle into their assessment recording procedures? What does that look like? And if Moodle isn't your LMS of choice, what does that integration for the recording process look like?
So I used Moodle many years ago, but it's been over a decade, so I can't really speak to that anymore.
No, I've never used that, sorry. No.
Okay, that's okay. If we do have any other questions on your specific LMS, please send them through and we can have a look at how we can integrate that as well. Let me just go through one more question before we can end the session. So this one is a little bit more about what students could know or what they should understand about starting their course online. So a lot of these students that might be coming from high school into a very different environment. What tips would you guys give them about starting a brand new course online, not having that face-to-face interaction? What can you offer?
I'll grab that one first, if that's okay. So I teach college freshmen, first semester students straight out of high school. I also am the mother of 2 high schoolers, so lots of experience here. I think when you're thinking about your course online, the key is engagement and getting students engaged. And I love Matthias's gamification because I think that's a big component of it. I'm not doing it in my class, I'm a little jealous. One of the things that I have found from teaching online for many years is creating a personality online throughout your LMS. For my students, it's very important that personality be very welcoming. So I do a welcome video where I usually have my dog. It sounds dumb, but everybody loves to see me with my dog, see me in my house doing crazy things. I do not record, I think this is key, I record videos, 10 to 15 minute videos so that students can download them, but they are not professionally edited in any way. They are just me as I would teach my class, and I have gotten a lot of feedback that students enjoy the fact that it's just me having a conversation and not a professional video. So I think there's a lot of push in the online world to make these very professional videos, but I'm not perfect in my classroom, so why would I be perfect on those videos? The other big thing, I ask questions throughout the videos that they then have to answer. My software will allow me to do that, and so that helps me track engagement. So there's just a couple of tips.
Yeah. Thank you. Very useful.
Anything that you had to offer as well, Matthias, or echoing the same sort of information there, just making it your own sort of personal stage and experience?
No, I don't have a lot of experience with online teaching because I think personal contact is key in teaching. So, and I'm happy to contribute to all these kind of webinars because I'm also learning a lot of all the participants. So thank you, Ginger.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your Q&A and obviously for running the session as well and giving us your experience in your classroom. So this will be the end of the session for today, guys. And everyone, as promised, these are the information for our speakers, our digital faculty consultant speakers that are using Connect and the digital assets and resources in their classes now. If you do want to reach out to anybody, please note down these details. You'll also be receiving these slides after the session, as well as any additional questions that we just did not get a chance to get around to today. Please also reach out to me. You received all of my information to sign up for this session if you have any other questions or if you want any local information about getting science online with Connect as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the moderators as well for helping out with this session. And thank you to the speakers, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.